John never spoke until he had written his speeches in secret, perfectly memorized them, and then he could repeat a sermon or a speech verbatim by simply reading it 3 times. He would then present them with clarity and with power.
John Witherspoon.
John Witherspoon.
John Witherspoon.
John Witherspoon was born on February 5th, 1722 in Gifford, Scotland. John's father was a reverend who valued education, so young John was placed in Haddington Grammar School. After learning all that he could there, John then attended the University of Edinburgh at the age of just 14 years old. 5 years later, John finished college and started preaching. He was offered to work with his father and eventually take over his position. But John chose to accept an invitation from the parish of Beith, west of Scotland. During his time in Beith, John met Elizabeth Montgomery, and the pair would get married and go on to have 10 children together, although only 5 survived more than a few years. With the political situation in Scotland in turmoil, and he having been held as a prisoner for a time after losing the Battle of Falkirk, John and Elizabeth decided to move to Paisley to further his career and hopefully escaped the violence back in Beith. In 1766, Benjamin Rush and Richard Stockton offered John a position as president and a professor at Princeton University, which was the College of New Jersey at the time. Elizabeth didn't want to leave her beloved Scotland, and so he declined the offer initially. But Mr. Stockton persuaded the pair into joining them. In 1768, John boarded a ship and moved his family to America. They crossed the ocean, and he took charge of the college in the new country, leaving behind him the respect of his community and his successful career. John quickly turned the college around by raising money to pay off debts, promoting a higher standard of curriculum, and ultimately boosting the school's attendance. With the revolution taking its toll on the college, John turned his attention to the issue then of independence. He warmly accepted an invitation to become a delegate to represent New Jersey. In 1776, he took his seat a few days previous to the 4th of July. During these few days, John notably said this to another gentleman who said that the time wasn't right for America to declare their independence. He said, "Sir, in my judgment, the country is not only ripe, but rotting for the want of it." John was able to join with the rest of the delegates in signing the Declaration on the 4th of July, 1776, at the age of 54. Having proven his worth to his constituents, John went on to represent New Jersey for 7 years. In 1792, John suffered eye injuries and he lost his sight entirely. With this and other ailments plaguing his health, John persevered with patience, and with a good, upbeat attitude, he didn't let these things hold him back. And he continued in his duties at the college and at the church until his death on November 15th, 1794, at the age of 72. John never spoke a word until he had settled the idea on the subject. He would then present these ideas with clarity and with power. His speeches were usually written in secret and perfectly memorized. He could repeat a sermon or a speech verbatim by simply reading it 3 times. Charles Augustus Goodrich writes of John Witherspoon. In his person, Dr. Witherspoon was remarkably dignified. He was 6 feet in height and of fine proportion. He was distinguished for a fervent piety and for great punctuality and exactness in his devotional exercises. He spent a great deal of attention to the young people. He would impart the most useful advice to them, and this was always done with so much kindness that they would listen attentively to what it was he said and would remember his advice. Another interesting trait besides his daily devotions of the closet, meaning his daily prayers, and his family, was the practice that the family observed on the last day of every year, using that day as a day of fasting, humility, and prayer. Now that is an excellent way to end the year. The end.